Welcome everyone to our webinar on how to land a great UX job with Andrew Doherty. My name is Chris Ventura and I'm one of the co-founders of Harness Projects. Harness Projects is an education company. We teach UX design skills in a completely project-based format. We help students break into the UX design industry with real project experience, a strong portfolio, and the confidence to speak to their design process when they get to those interviews. I was really fortunate to connect with Andrew while he was en route to Australia from Germany at the beginning of the year. And since then, Andrew has mentored our students on 2 of our 9-week UX design projects. And one of the topics that we have spoken at length about is the process of getting our graduates jobs in the industry. Some of you may know Andrew from his TED Talk, or perhaps you're one of his students on our recent courses. You would be familiar with Andrew's unique view on the UX design job hunting process. So tonight is really a chance to learn from someone who is a living example of the techniques that can really help you land a great UX job. Andrew has worked at Google, Amazon, as well as other well-known brands around the world, and has been able to do this using the approach he'll be taking you through tonight. So before we kick off with Andrew, I just want to name a few housekeeping things. Throughout the talk today, we will be pausing to field your questions. So if you have a question that you would like to ask, please write your question via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to get to them. We will also cover approximately 2 questions per break throughout the presentation. And just to ensure that we keep it moving along, we won't have too many questions during the preso, but then we will try and get through everything else at the end of the presentation. So there'll be a good chunk of questions at the end, so hang on for that. Also on the panel today, I want to introduce Tom Cotter. Tom runs a talent consultancy called Fearless, which works with design leaders to acquire, assemble, and scale design teams. He has been working in design hiring for 6 years with some of the biggest design leaders in the industry. So Tom is with us to help answer questions from that recruitment lens, and hopefully together with Andrew can provide you all with a really well-rounded view of the UX job market. All right, that's everything from me for now. So without further ado, over to Andrew to kick things off.
Thanks, Chris, and hey, Tom, and hey, everyone. It was so great to see everyone's messages coming in from all over the world. I was saying to Chris just a few moments ago that I'm actually a little nervous, but not for the reason that you think. I said to him I was nervous because I've never spoken in front of so many people before without wearing any pants. And then he said, maybe don't tell that joke. And then I said, but I need them to understand that I can't hear them laugh, so I'm just going to laugh at my own jokes all night. So I hope you're all right with that, because I have no problems laughing at my jokes. I think they're funny. So yeah, I'm really excited to speak to you all. The feedback that we got over the last 2 weeks when we decided that we were going to do the webinar has been great. We've got a lot of questions that came in, and I'm just so flattered and humbled that you've all shown up tonight, and thank you so much. So I better get started. Many of you might know me already because you've come via my YouTube or from LinkedIn. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Andrew Doherty, and I've been working in UX design for quite some time. So I like to say that I has experience, like I has cheeseburger. And some of the clients that I've worked for over the years, you will recognize, and I've worked on projects that are probably part of your daily life, which is, as a designer, something that I'm consistently humbled and also a little bit terrified about when I see some of my mistakes impacting people's lives everywhere. But I've also worked for some great Australian companies that many of you, if you're overseas, haven't necessarily heard of. And I've put some logos up here, but I just wanted to show that, yeah, I've been doing this for a while. And one of the things that came up while I was kind of doing this job is, how did I do the job? Every time I would get a new job, my peers and colleagues would ask me how I did it, because they would want to know how I advanced or how I accomplished it. And then it just kind of bloomed into this question that kept coming up in the teaching experience with Harness Projects and all of the students, which was, but how do you get the job? But how do you get the job? And there was a lot of focus on how to be a great designer, but not too much necessarily about how to get the job. So I want to just focus on that today. Why is this important now? What's actually happening in the world now that's making this topic relevant? I want to share some data with you. So about 4 to 5 years ago, 2016, so 4 years ago, I gave a talk at a keynote presentation in Hungary, in Budapest, about how to get a job at Google, or how to get a great UX job. And much of what I discussed in that talk, I'm going to cover over again today. Not all of it, because we've got some extra detail we're going to go into tonight. But a lot of that, the topics were related to how to get the job, what's the process, how to nail an interview. And what I found really interesting was that when that video went up on YouTube in late 2016, there was a little bit of a bump. I saw some traffic, but just in the last 6 months, it's gone sort of crazy. And there were some days there over the last couple of weeks where we've had, I think, around 3,500 people viewing the video per day. And it's just gone mental. And I can only really attribute that to the fact that entropy and change is a thing, and also maybe coronavirus. So a lot of people are really sitting, self-reflecting, trying to figure out what their next move is going to be. And I think that this data is representative of the fact that there's been a change. But what has actually changed? Careers change. And when we look at the data and I've run some numbers. I can't unfortunately get a lot of data from Australia. The Australian Bureau of Statistics didn't give it to me, but I've got some American data which gives us an indication of what's going on. It turns out that people, you, me, everybody, we change careers completely a lot. So you in your life will change career probably somewhere between 5 to 7 times while you are living. And if you look at the actual frequency of change, it's about 30% of the workforce is changing their job every 12 months. So you're probably one of those people, just like me. We're constantly changing in our positions. And also, very importantly, change is not a bad thing. There's this perception that changing your job makes you look a little shady or a bit wishy-washy, but that's just not true. Recruiters expect you to work probably somewhere between 12 to 24 months in a single job. And for project-oriented work like UX, it could even be as low as 6 months for a project. To give you some other data, Google released some data suggesting that the average time a Googler will stay at Google is 14 months. So after all that work of getting all the way there, they leave within 14 months. I think I stayed just around 18 months. So I'm a little bit over the average, but it still wasn't a long time. And it's because UX design is a career that I think is blooming. There's just more and more and more need for us. It's a candidate short market. And I know, when you look at the data and you look at the job advertisements, it gets a bit worrisome, or maybe there's not a job there for me. But the truth is that there just is. There's so much work for so many of us to do. And when we look at coronavirus and we look at what's actually happening in the world, a lot of companies are going to be moving very rapidly to move what was typically bricks and mortar businesses online. So while you might not see that uptick in employment happening just right now, I'm making the guess that it will happen pretty soon, and it will happen quite rapidly. So yeah, sit tight. This space is pretty hot. Just to give you some stats that I found about UX jobs right now, in the USA, there's over 238,000 UX designers currently employed in roles as UX designers, over 129,000 companies. And in Australia, it's around 16,000 UX designers are employed right now. And that doesn't include CX, so people who call themselves customer experience or product designers. So this is just a number pulled straight from LinkedIn. It doesn't include UX engineers or UX writers or any of the verticals. It's just UX designer, and there's about 16,000 roles. Salaries are high. UX managers is one of the top salaries in the entire United States, not just in tech, in any job. It's in the top 25. And the average salary for a UX designer in the United States is around $100,000 Australian. It's around $83,000 US. So it's quite a high salary for people who don't necessarily have a graduate degree. And when we look at, experience like my own, I didn't have a graduate degree. UX design is still one of the highest paying tech jobs in the world where a graduate degree is not required to be successful. It's not required to get the job, and it's not required to do the job, and it's not required to be promoted in the job. So how did I get started? How did this whole UX design thing happen for me? I started about 14 years ago, but I want to go a little bit further back from that, just to give you an indication of the kind of person I am and how my story played out. And I hope it will make sense as we go through, because I don't want you to think that I somehow bought my way in, that I went to some Ivy League top tier university and I managed, that I got lucky. I'm just this little farm boy kid who grew up in Queensland in the country, growing watermelons and dirt roads and tank water and, sometimes no electricity. I remember there was a Christmas where the entire house was completely underwater for 2.5 weeks because we got flooded and a crocodile swam in our front yard. So, I'm from the sticks, and I didn't study design or technology at university. In fact, for a long time there, I didn't even go to university. I went to uni when I was about 23 and I studied rocks. I thought rocks were super cool. So I was studying Lavoli techniques, which is a way of slicing a rock with another rock to make it sharp. Super cool topic, actually, because turns out that these designs were some of the first designs ever made by humans, and they were iterated on just like we iterate on designs as UX designers. So I love rocks, and that's how I got started. And I actually failed design in school. I didn't do very well in many subjects, including mathematics. So yeah, failing design didn't really set me up to be a successful designer. And my first job was working at McDonald's. And I'm not ashamed to say it. McDonald's was, an amazing job. I was 13 and 9 months old. I remember, because that was the earliest you could start work in Queensland, was 13 and 9 months. And I started part-time at McDonald's, and my job was serving on the counter. That was also new for McDonald's. They didn't have boys or men serving on the front counter. We were supposed to be cooking, but I insisted that I wanted to get closer to the customers and, deal with customers. And it was great. I dealt with a lot of customer complaints, a lot of problems, a lot of babies getting lost in ball pits. And yeah, it was a really great job. My second job was working for a bank. It was working in a call center. And my role was to take complaint calls from customers who'd had something go wrong, like, their card going missing in the middle of the night, or their loan repayment not being able to be made. Mostly it was people who were at their most stressed, most afraid, calling an implacable company, hoping for help. And my job was to empathize with those customers and see what I could do to help them. The reason that I'm painting this picture is that it's not typical of what you'd expect for somebody who ends up working for a company like Google. I didn't, start in tech, and I didn't get a graduate degree in tech. I came via McDonald's and a call center, working in a bank. So, but getting to Google was hard, and I'm going to give you some stats. They've probably changed a little bit since I last searched, but it's around 2 to 3 million applications that Google receives every year for any job. So, it could be tech, it could be working as a lawyer, it could be working in multiple verticals, but it's still around up to 3 million applications, and it's only ever going up. And that's around 60,000 applicants per week that they go through, with a 0.25% chance of success. So it's a really hard job to get. And I just want to draw that parallel for you, that I shouldn't have been able to get it, and I did. And I'm going to share with you how I did, because I think you can do the same sort of thing too. Not necessarily that you want to go to Google, you might just want to work anywhere. You might want to work for a local company or a startup, but the process that I went through is the same process regardless. So where did this start? How did I start applying the process? Well, I went back to my roots, and my passion prior to working was actually playing games, playing on my Commodore 64 and writing programs on my Commodore 64 from a book. You had to transpose them. It was super laborious, and most of the time it never worked. And when I got my Atari, it was like a game changer for me, because I was able to just play games by sticking in a cartridge. And solving puzzles was a huge part of my life growing up as a kid, and I really enjoyed it. And when I meet UX designers all around the world and I speak to them, this is something that I found that many of us have in common. Not necessarily that we all played with Commodore 64, but that we all get a kick out of solving a complex puzzle and solving it efficiently and solving it quickly. But one thing keeps coming up, which is that to get a UX job, you need to have experience. And I refer to it as the chicken and egg paradox, because I even experienced this as well, but I know many of you do, because I hear from you all the time, which is, how do I get experience without first getting experience? Because the first job wants you to have experience before they'll give you the job. So it's sort of this, chicken egg paradox, and how do you break that paradox? Well, the good news is that since I started, it's gotten a lot easier to break. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail here. First, my career timeline, because this will help me illustrate how I broke the paradox. If we look closely, this is my whole career. I kind of put everything here. I didn't put Westpac, but when I started uni, was around the same time I started working in tech and making, you know, programs for, you know, friends and websites for family and colleagues. But it was never, you know, paid work. It was just little things. But I was working in graphic design and I had a bootleg copy of Photoshop. And if we look closely, the actual project experience that I used to get, you know, my role at Google probably was the 3 years prior to that. And that was working for Macquarie Bank, doing a contract for NDN. I went on a sabbatical. I did some project work for a consulting firm in London, and I did some project work for a company called SMS. And that was it. That was the only project work that I had prior to getting to Google. And that was enough. That was enough for me to get the hardest job in the world. But how did I get those first jobs? How did I get to Macquarie Bank? Well, I actually started working at a company called Squiz, which was a small web development firm. And they required also that I had experience. But back then there was no way for me to get it. There was no clients that were willing to give me a job. So I actually registered fake websites and paid for domain names and made a cupcake bakery, a veterinarian, a few doctors' clinics, and it was all completely fake. It was just me designing and coding these websites so that I could put something together in a portfolio. And that was a lot of work, and it also almost backfired. I didn't lie to Squiz. I didn't say to them that those companies were real, but it was very like, you know, I'm winking and I'm nodding at you and hoping that you realize that I had to do this because I want in, and this was the only way I could give you what you asked for, which was experience. But since I met with Chris, who is working with Harness Projects, it turns out that there are more and more ways for you to get project experience that doesn't involve you kind of pulling together a fake cupcake bakery website. And Harness Projects has worked on a number of client projects for their students. And these are projects where you actually can show your work. You can put it up on your portfolio. You are working for a real client on a real project. So I've just put some logos up here that I know that they've worked on with their various clients, but Harness isn't the only way, but it's one of the great ways for you to quickly get some project experience so that you are able to break that chicken and egg cycle, and you don't have to do it by making up fake cupcake websites. So I'm going to touch on that again later and just talk a little bit more about project experience, but I want to move on, which is how do you actually get the job? So let's assume that you've got some project experience either through one of these courses or through faking something or through luck, but you want to get that next job. And getting a job is a bit like solving a Rubik's Cube. You can't just start spinning it and hope for the best. It doesn't solve itself. You have to apply an algorithm. You have to apply thought processes. You have to use math. You have to have steps that you take to get the cube to be solved. And getting a job is exactly the same. And if you imagine sitting there with a Rubik's Cube and just sort of spinning it and hoping for the best, you'll just be spinning it forever and you'll never actually get anywhere. And that's some of the feedback that I get from my students and from my peers, is that they try and try and try, and for some reason it just never works out. And I feel like they're not applying the formula. So I'm going to go through the step-by-step formula with you. I call it the aha moment because I remember where I was exactly when it happened. I had some experience in design. I was at a restaurant and I'd had a particularly sugary dessert, which kind of made my brain go crazy. And then I wrote it down on a napkin, which was, getting the job is the job. That was the first thing that I wrote down. And what I mean by that is that if I can't demonstrate to the customer, to the client, to the company that I am good at getting the job, then it's hard for them to imagine that I can actually be a good designer, because my project is my application. I am the product, and getting the job is just like selling a product. My features and benefits are actually my experience and my capabilities. So if I think of myself as the product, then that must mean that the employer is the customer and they're actually buying me. The customer is always right. That's the other thing. I can't argue with them and tell them, you're wrong, I'm great. Although I will show you a little hint how you can get close to saying that. But remember, the customer is buying you. So you're the product, the employer is the customer, and getting the job is just like doing the job. So if we're UX designers, we know how to UX our work, right? We have a process in place. We can apply UX principles to solving problems. So we can apply these same principles to our job application process. I have a little quote that I've used over the years, which is that when you can't differentiate on product or price, the only thing left is customer experience. And what I mean by that is, in a world where the market is being saturated by other UX designers who all say, I can do the same thing as every other one, how do you differentiate yourself? Well, the way that you are interacting with the client, with the customer, which is your company, your experience with them, their experience with you, that's how you differentiate yourself. So a generic UX process definitely has these 3 steps. There's many more interim steps, and you can loop and iterate, and you can do the double diamond, and you can do all of the stuff. But for simplicity's sake, I've narrowed it down to the 3 primary buckets, which is do some research, design and iterate, and then deliver. So I'm going to go through each of these buckets. We'll stop for questions each of the way through, so that if anything pops up or if you've got a question, please feel free to ask in the Q&A, and we can try to get to some of them. But let's start with research. So if we look at a research plan, we can make this plan much longer, but I've tried to make it pretty short so that we can get through it all. We first do a bit of a refresher, right? So we want to understand, what is the job application process like? What is the timeline of that process? How does it actually work? Some of you listening today, or here today, maybe haven't actually applied for a UX design job just yet, and you want to know what that process is, because it is different to applying for other jobs. There are steps that you've maybe never experienced before. So I want to give you that heads up. You need to research the market as well, which is, what's your location? What are the jobs available in that location? What are the salary ranges for jobs of that type in that location? And what are the kinds of companies that are available? The job itself is also important, and that comes from what the job is described as in the position description and the requirements of the person who needs to do that job. Be careful, because not all of the requirements are actually real, especially the ones where they talk about years of experience. They're pretty flexible. So don't feel disheartened if there's one requirement in a list that doesn't resonate with you. And we also need to look at our personas, our people, the sources, the recruiters, the interviewers, and the managers. We want to understand how they think, what they feel, and what they're likely to do based on how we interact with them. And the fit. Is this company the right company for me? Do I actually want to do this job for them? Is this going to advance my career, or put it on hold, or maybe detriment it in some way? Okay, so I'm going to go through the process, which is the refresher on the timeline of how you apply for a job and what steps occur. So step 1 is the application, whether that be inbound or outbound. Inbound means that you were approached. Outbound means you applied for it by approaching that company. And the application is reviewed by, I call them implacable sources, which implacable means unable to be pleased. So then after that, a sourcer screener call will take place. If you're successful, that first step's really hard, because a lot of the sources just reject you before they don't even read it, but they just reject you. So the sourcer screener call is the first big step, and be careful, because it's the most difficult step. They're actually not wanting to care about you, not wanting to help you, not wanting to spend more than they have to with you in minutes. They just want to move on to the next one. It's like a net, and they're just trying to catch big fish, or the fish that they're looking for. Step 3, if you succeed with getting through that implacable sourcer, is to meet with the recruiter, either in person or over the phone. And I found that recruiters lately are much more likely to be located off-site or in random places. So it's usually a phone call or a Zoom or video or Skype or something like that. And their job is to confirm that you're not a dud. So the sourcer is just trying to confirm that you've got the buzzwords and the checklists match up. And the recruiter is just trying to confirm that you're able to speak a sentence with them, understand them when they speak to you, answer questions quickly and effectively, that you're able to impress them the way you would maybe impress an interviewer if they were to pass you forward. And they want to be on your side. So the source is trying to reject you. The recruiter is looking for a reason to keep you. They're actually hoping that you're not wasting their time. They're hoping that you're the real deal. So think of them as a potential ally. They're not your enemy. And if they're on your side, the door's open. Step 3, if you get through the recruiter, is to get to an interview with a hiring manager or an interviewer, or multiple of those. So it could be one interview or multiple. I think I had 7 in total with Google the second time, and another 3 after that when they went and put me up for a different position. But the interviews could be numerous and difficult. They're usually situational based questions. So tell me about a time when, and we'll go into that in more detail soon. And there's probably some design challenge, which we'll also talk about in this presentation tonight. If you succeed in getting through the interview or interviews, then you'll be bounced back to the recruiter, either to offer you a job or to reject you if you didn't succeed. And how you handle this step matters a lot. Rejection is probably what's going to happen to you, to me, to anyone. So don't let it break you, because the way that you handle that rejection matters a lot in terms of what the recruiter thinks of you and whether that recruiter will talk to you again for another position. If you're successful after an offer, there is also usually a background check, whether it be for the client or whether it be run remotely or run by an alternate company that is offshore, or doing a kind of back office related task. And it's super important as well, because you've gone through all of this trouble to get through these steps, only to discover that you were mistaken with a date that you put on your resume by a couple of days even, and it comes up in the background check and it feels like the world's ending, and sometimes it can actually derail the process. So I would say those 5 steps are the primary buckets of what happens. You'll get an offer letter after that, and then onboarding if you're successful. So that was our process refresher. I want to just talk about the market for a second. So the UX CX market is an interesting one, because while it looks like there might not be many positions, we must always remember that the attrition rate in those positions is very high. So those people who are doing those jobs don't stay for very long. Remember, we saw that they leave usually within 6 to 12 months. So because it's project-based work, it means that there are many jobs, they're advertised quickly and they come up and down quickly. So every day you log in, there'll be 50 new UX or CX positions and another 50 that just popped off because they were filled. And it's still a candidate short market. And Tom, I think, is going to talk about that a little bit later when we ask him some questions. He might have some unique insight about the market itself. But I just did a cursory look, and in Australia, and I'm sorry for everyone who's global, but Australia might be a nice litmus test because it's a medium-sized market. But in Australia, just today, 173 UX positions were advertised on LinkedIn and 309 on Indeed. So that's a lot. And in the USA, there's 4,784 open positions. And in the UK, there's 941. So everyone in this room, everyone watching this webinar is able to apply for one of these jobs. And if we're all lucky, we won't even fill the quota. So just keep that in mind when we're thinking about the market. Okay, a little bit about the job, do some research on the job itself. You probably saw a position description, whether it was because you were hunting for the job on LinkedIn or Indeed or one of these job aggregator services, or because a recruiter reached out to you or a sourcer reached out to you and gave you a position description to look over it. Beware when they ask for too many things. So I call it a unicorn position. And you might even see them say this: we want a unicorn, we want a unicorn. And a unicorn is somebody who's expected to do everything. So you have to be a UX designer, a UI designer, a project manager. You need to be able to code, and you need to be able to code in the back end as well. And you should have some ridiculous number of years experience, and you should be comfortable working overtime to just get the job done. And our company's great. We have free snacks. So be careful when you read positions like this. You can apply, sure, go for it. Not necessarily just yet. I'll tell you when the right time is, but be prepared that you might not actually want that job. So if you're wanting the practice of applying, sure, let's do it. But just be careful, because these particular jobs indicate to me there's a bit of a red flag in the way that the organization or company is structured. And it could result in you getting a job that you hate, that's difficult to leave because you just did 1 or 2 months, and then it makes it look like you were fired when you weren't, you just hated it. So there's a little bit of red flaggy stuff there, and you can kind of sniff it out. But if you're in any doubt, reach out to me and I can tell you. We want to do a little bit of research on the people as well. So if we see a job and we see that it was advertised by Acme Holdings, I'm using them as an example. I don't think it's a real company, I hope. And I would typically go into incognito mode. I have a fake LinkedIn account and I log in as Joe Smith or whatever the name is. And I look at the people who work for the company. I look at who the sources or talent scouts are, the recruiters, where they've worked before. I look at the interviewers. So these are the people who usually have the job title hiring manager or head of, design or something like that. I check them all out and I want to know where they've worked before, whether they've worked for companies that were evil, whether they've worked for companies that I respect and that I look up to. And I just try to get a lay of the land. Who am I dealing with here? So that if I do end up being passed between these different phases of the interview process, I have an idea of who Sam is and who Mary is. And it's worked for me in the past to know this information, because it's made me more agile in my way of navigating the murky waters of job applications. So yeah, don't do it from your own LinkedIn though, because you get one shot. So they're viewing who viewed their profile. If you look right now and you're using your LinkedIn at a job application and the different people working for that company, they might look at your profile just to see if you're a viable candidate. And if you're not ready and you haven't got all of your ducks in a row, then your one shot is spent when you were just browsing. So that's why I recommend just having a fake LinkedIn account. It's not because you're being seedy or dodgy. It's just you don't want to waste that one shot that you've got to really blow them out of the water when they see how awesome you are. So there's a few personas to consider if we think of it as a UX project. I don't know if you know who Sophia is, but she's the robot there on the left. And I like her because she reminds me of sources. So if any of you on the call tonight are sources, I apologize humbly for offending you, but I've had some pretty negative experiences with sources pretty much every time I've ever had to deal with them. I really struggle with finding sources who care about humans, care about the company they work for, and care about finding the right person for the job. So I've put her in there as a robot. The recruiter is somebody who's a bit more ominous. They're looking at you, squinting and trying to really understand who you are. They're really looking deep. They want to see what you're capable of. They want to see whether you're going to embarrass them if they put you forward for interview. And then interviewer or ers. I've put this tired dude. You can't see his coffee, but he's tired and he's drinking coffee. And the reason I've done that is because mostly interviewers inside of companies are people who are just doing the job and have been told, by the way, don't forget you have that interview on Friday at lunchtime. And now, you know, in addition to doing all of their work, they have to find an hour somewhere to spend with some random who probably won't get the job. And they have to try to be nice to you for an hour and help you try to apply for a job that you're not going to get. So yeah, interviewers tend to be the most battered and sad and tired employees I meet with when I go to companies, which means you should be nice to them because they're taking time out of their normal lives to help you, and they really do want to help you. Tom will like this. So I've put external recruiters here as Superman. So I'm really hoping that Tom is laughing right now because he's an external recruiter. So they're also called headhunters or talent sources, and they have many different names, but they will fight for you. They will get into an argument with the client and say, you're wrong. He can do it. She can do it. You just didn't read it, you know, and they're allowed to fight for you, because if they sort of fight, then you're not embarrassing yourself in front of the client. You're not kind of burning down the forest. They're able to do it. It's their job to find the right candidate, which means sometimes speaking truth to power. So yeah, if you get reached out to by a talent sourcer, although sometimes they get referred to as used car salesmen because we're all used, they are actually really great and they're on your side. And I'm so grateful for them, because some of my first big projects I received using external talent sources or external recruiters. Okay, and just quickly the fit with the company. So if you're doing that LinkedIn stalky thing that we talked about and you figure out who the boss is, who the CEO is, or who the head of is, check them out. And what have they done before? What does their Twitter feed say? What does their LinkedIn post say? Have they ever said anything that you really don't agree with? Or have they written a Medium article that says users suck or something? You know, whatever it is, just check out the boss. You want to make sure that your boss is somebody that you can respect. If you can, try to meet with them if you're going through the interview process as well. Ask to speak to the boss. You want to know who you're going to be working for. And then the position. It's hard to answer this question because you're not inside yet, but you can sort of maybe reach out to people who used to work for the company. You can find them on LinkedIn as well. And reach out and say, hey, I'm looking at applying for a position at Acme Holdings, and I just want to know, what was it like for you when you worked there? And they might be able to give you some information that you can't find easily online, like don't do it, or it was great, they were amazing. So I put this person as a goalie because if your job is to be expected to catch things before they go live and try to hope and pray that they don't go live, it's going to be a really hard job for you, because the system is going to be set up for you to kind of fight with everyone and get hit a lot by flying balls through the air, which are, you know, products that shouldn't be going live in their current state, and the business and everyone's fighting for it to happen and get the goal, and you're the last little goalie trying to prevent the catastrophe from happening. So just when you're doing your own squint test, remember that you're interviewing the company too, and what they think of UX design or product design and the way that they approach projects matters, because your success will be a direct consequence of how this goes, how they treat, you know, UX. And lastly, the product itself. Are you selling sugar to kids or cigarettes, or are you working in gaming, or are you working for a company that has typically done the wrong thing by customers? And the reason I mention this isn't just because it's evil, but because it does make it harder for you to get other positions that you want to go for. I can pretty much guarantee that if I had worked for Big Tobacco, like one of the consulting firms that I worked for asked me to do, and I put that project on my website, I would not have got my job at Google or Amazon. So the nature of the project matters, and what it does matters. Now, I'm not saying that you're all in a position to just reject every offer that comes your way, but you may need to hide that you worked for one of the, you know, companies that maybe has done some difficult things in the past that has made the lives of people crap. So yeah, keep that in mind. And more as we move into the future, some of the social media companies are actually starting to fit squarely into this bucket of products that aren't necessarily good for humanity. So that's our research process done. I mean, that's a lot of work to do up front for a position you may not even apply for, but you'll notice that at no stage throughout that process did we click apply now. We just wanted to get a lay of the land and try to understand what was happening. Apply now is not what you want to do just yet, because if you do, that's your one shot and you're not ready, and it could be terrible. And like I said, it's one shot, you get one go. So no, we are not going to apply now. And I'm going to give you an example of why you shouldn't do it. So in the coursework that we worked on at Harness Projects for one of our groups, I was trying to explain to the groups how, the participants, that we shouldn't apply now. And I actually did a little test. So there's a company called Small PDF, and they're located in Switzerland. They had a job advertisement. I liked their little logo with the boxes. It reminded me of Post-it notes. So I clicked apply now in front of the team, because I wanted to show them what would happen, because I knew it wouldn't take too long. So I clicked apply now, and it did the autocomplete on LinkedIn, and off went my details. And within a couple of days of applying, I received this email from an employee from Small PDF. Dear Andrew, thanks a lot for your application. We appreciate you taking the time. Generic, generic, generic. Although we were impressed by your qualifications, the competition was stiff. And unfortunately, we've decided not to move forward with you, and we're going to go with other candidates. And we wish you every success. Sweet, except that it can't possibly be true. And I want to put my ego up there and put it on a flag and say, I'm waving it. Hello, ego. But I've got a lot of experience, and I've probably been one of the first UX designers in the world to start calling themselves that. So for somebody to have more experience than me is sort of a red flag. And I did it because I wanted to prove to our students that they didn't even check. My application was absolutely not reviewed, I'm sure, because if it was, I should have got through that first step. And what I did was I checked out the person who rejected me on LinkedIn. I've kind of blurred them a bit here so that we don't find out who it is, but they are a new employee of Small PDF. They've been there 9 months. I've blanked out a bunch of their experience here in the middle between Small PDF and this other company with the orange logo, because there's positions. But I wanted to know how long they've been doing this sort of job for, and it goes back to 2013. So for reference, Google first approached me to work for them in 2014. So I've got a lot of experience compared to the person who just rejected me without ever checking out who I was or what I've been up to. So just keep that in mind, that apply now is not a sure route to success. It's highly likely you will be rejected without them ever viewing, you know, your profile or checking out what you're capable of. And I looked just now to see if Small PDF is still advertising, and that position is still available. So they told me that the competition was stiff and they found another candidate. Turns out maybe they didn't, because the position has just been re-advertised and they're still looking for someone with enough experience to get through. And my friend David, who I adore, sent me this amazing tweet which reminds me of that story, which is a developer who created an API. He said, I saw a job post the other day. It required 4 years plus of experience in fast API. Unfortunately, I couldn't apply because I only have 1.5 years of experience, because that's when I created it. So the person who created the API for the very first time is not eligible to apply for the position to work for a project that uses that software, that product. So yeah, just keep in mind that when they list years of experience, it's not necessarily the truth. And if you are rejected by a sourcer or a first step process, they probably haven't even looked closely at your profile, and it's not personal, and they aren't trying to make you feel bad or anything like that. They're just a big business with a lot happening, and you're just slipping through the cracks. So we have to now share with you some ways that you're not going to slip through the cracks. So before we move on to applying, I want to just open up to some questions, and we can just see if Chris is available, and if you have any questions, Chris, that have been asked from any of the group.
Sure, Andrew. So we do. I will try and pick the most research-related questions. We've got about 15, so we'll get through a couple of them now.
Okay.
First question is actually a good question for both of you, Andrew and Tom. How long do recruiters typically spend viewing an applicant's website or portfolio?
My opinion is about 15 seconds. What do you think, Tom?
I would say about 30 seconds to a minute. I think they look at like the top line stuff first, so have that sort of very generic overview, and then if they're interested, they go sort of deeper and explore. But a lot of internal recruiters, for example, don't actually understand design, so they kind of just look for buzzwords, which is so frustrating. But yeah, I can talk a lot more about that later down the line, but not long at all. At all.
Awesome, thanks guys. So next one is it a good idea to apply for multiple positions in the same company? Why or why not?
Go for it, Tom.
Yeah, no. So I was working with a company called Zalando in Berlin early this year, late last year. And essentially your application goes, normally in these big companies, goes to an ATS system, which is essentially where hiring managers, internal talent managers, stakeholders in the business will see who's applied for what role. And if your name keeps popping up, they kind of look at that in a bad way around that you haven't done your research, you're just applying for everything, kind of spamming the company. So it's good to be a little bit more tailored in your application process, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's a sense of desperation, and it's not necessarily the truth, but the perception matters, because again, it's unfortunately you're selling a product and perception matters. Yeah.
And a lot of companies have, like Zalando, we created a one spec for all design roles. So they had open recs around 80 to 100 designers that they were looking for. And you would just apply for one job, and then you would be considered for all roles. So if the company has a really good talent acquisition process, your name will be sent around all the hiring managers, all the different business units. So you don't actually need to apply for every role that you see on their job board.
Yeah. I will say sometimes it goes the other way by accident. So Spotify has the issue that if you're rejected for one role, they encourage you to apply for the other ones. So there's an accidental sort of bias to create more applications because people want to work for Spotify. So, but they maybe don't have that centralized system just yet. But I know for sure that Google does, and that if you, and Amazon too, if you end up in that pool of candidates and you are rejected for one position, but it's because the specifics of that position are not right for you, you are not a rejected candidate. You are just not right for that one position, and they will reach out to you if they can. And I've seen it happen multiple times.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. I'll move on, Chris, because I've realized I'm talking too slow, even though I talk too fast. So I want to make sure I get through the design, if that's all right.
Sure.
So the design steps is what comes next. And we've got 4 buckets: design your CV, resume, design your website /folio, design your cover letter if you need one, and design your social media. So I'm going to power through and just quickly show you an embarrassing CV, which was mine. This was a CV I created to get a job at a bank when I was young, and it worked, which is the funny thing because it shouldn't have. But I thought, you know, banks, criminals, bank robbers, I should make myself a wanted poster. So yeah, don't do this, but it worked. And the reason it worked is that it stood out. But there are ways to make your CV stand out that doesn't involve you putting your face behind bars. So don't use Microsoft Word templates unless the recruiter that you're dealing with as a headhunter has asked for it specifically, because they've got a system where they take out the data and put it into their own special branded CV for you. Otherwise, yeah, don't use them because they're ugly and they're recognizable and they suck. And don't make it too fancy either. Don't spend a lot of time trying to, you know, riff on the design, because if it looks like you've made it too elaborate and with ornate kind of filigrees and stuff, they're going to think, what were you doing? Why did you have so much time? Don't you have a job? No experience stars or those sliders that say, oh, Andrew's 70% proficient at UX design. Just don't put them in, because why would you say that you're not good at something? And no typos ever. Read it backwards, get a friend to read it backwards, and that's how you catch the typos. Because when you read things forwards, your brain will fill in the blanks of the mistakes and you don't even see them anymore. And no headshots, maybe Tom will disagree with me, but no headshots, no age, no date of birth, no religion. You would be amazed how many times we get resumes with people putting that stuff in because they think it's important. But it's actually really dangerous, because if we interview a candidate and then reject them when we knew the whole time that they were old, young, big, small, gay, straight, trans, a certain religion, it puts it in this very murky territory about they were rejected because of the merits of not being able to do the position, but we knew that they were a Scientologist, for example. Uh-oh, what happens now? You know, so just don't put it on there, and then you're avoiding that mess entirely of being judged or confused with something that you maybe aren't. So yeah, just leave it out. And if you apply for a position where they ask for it, that's a red flag. Okay, so here's just a quick view on my CV. It's just bland. It's just very bland. I try not to put as too many words. Like my rule is 5 lines if there's a paragraph, and that's it, and 1 paragraph only. And I just try to keep it very, very simple. And you can probably find it online, but there are other, I'm not saying it's the best, but I just wanted to show you that it has improved since I put my face behind bars. And I try to just tell a little bit of information about what my role and responsibilities were, and maybe what was the unique differentiator of that product or project versus others. So that's a bit on CV. Keep it simple, keep it clean, make sure there's no typos, and don't be too crazy with it. Now time to move on to website and folio. And I know I get this question a lot. How do I design a website? How do I design a folio? So I want to bring you back to that first question where I talked to you earlier about getting the job is doing the job. So try first to solve this yourself, because if you can't design your own portfolio, we might start to wonder whether you can do the job as a UX designer. So give it a good shot first before asking for help, because modification is much easier than creation. Just get started and you can start tweaking it and fixing it, rather than going to someone when you've got a blank piece of paper and saying, help, you know. So the website obviously needs to be online. I don't think you should just attach a PDF folio. That's very graphic designer. That's very like 1990s and early noughties. So it should be online. Use your name as a domain name. So no like sexychick.cc or whatever. It should just be marysmith.com. If you can't get marysmith.com, get marysmithdesign.com, and just keep adding words until you can get it. marysmithdesigner.com or something like that. But you should use your name as best as you can and try to get the .com. They're about $12 a year and it's worth the cost. Do not roll your own, which means code your own. Unless you're like super proficient with HTML, CSS, and JS and that you've coded websites a lot, just don't do it. The reason is you might make it look really great on one web form or viewport, like a laptop, but then as soon as it needs to be responsive or the person's on a bigger screen or smaller screen, it starts to break. And then that makes you a failed UX designer, because you didn't consider what happens when your customers use a different platform to view the product. So some of the advantages of using templating engines like Wix or Canva or Squarespace is a team of very talented designers and engineers have done all of that work for you. And the last thing you need to do is just white label it with your own brand. Put your name, put your logo, put your brand colors and your project work in there. So I tried to reach out to Squarespace to see if they would give us a promo code to give to the rest of you. And I'd been emailing them backwards and forwards for the last 6 weeks. The answer was no. So please try Wix or Canva. And the website folio needs to contain your project experience. Do not make the mistake of thinking that you need to have 20 years of project experience on your portfolio. You don't. You just need to have maybe 2 or 3 key projects that show what you're capable of. Whether the project was successful or not doesn't actually matter. In fact, even if it didn't go live, it doesn't matter, because the people who are viewing it aren't going then to the website and checking. Most of the time, projects are internal. They're an app that has not yet launched. There's a lot of stuff that you can't view as the hiring manager trying to check it out. We only get to see what you show us. So what you show us matters, and it's up to you, which means you don't have to show everything. Just pick a few projects that you are proud of. And when I went for Google, I had 2 projects on my website, just 2. And that was enough for me to get the hardest UX job in the world. So if you get 2 projects, you're in a really great space to get started. Obviously, there's a lot of work around what you do with that. And my other talk on YouTube shows a lot of detail about how to get your folio up and running and certain techniques to make it look right. I don't want to narrow down too much on that today, but I can say that there are ways for you to benchmark yourself. If you found another UX designer who's done it well, copy them and make it your own, and email them and apologize if you want to feel better, but they won't care because they copied somebody else too. Okay. And no typos on the website either. No typos ever. Typos are super easy to fix. And if they get through, it means you weren't paying attention, which means what's your attention to detail like on the job? Okay. I've got 3 examples of some portfolios that I really liked, and not because I went into the project work of those particular designers. Maybe the project work wasn't so great, but they certainly caught my attention, and they did it because they made me feel connected to the person straight away. So Vera Chen here has really won me over by crossing out that people are users. So she's saying, don't call them users, they're people. And right away, without ever seeing that she worked for Uber or Facebook, I would have kept scrolling and wanting to know what she was up to and what she's capable of, because she's been very opinionated about something that matters to her and matters and should matter to the world. And she's shown it to me in the very first thing she says about herself. Priyanka's done also a great job at showing a little bit about her personality. She included an emoji. Hi there, I'm a product designer and tech enthusiast based in San Francisco. So it's very simple, but it's just conversational in tone. And as you scroll down, check it out. There's a lot of great work there that she's put in for her projects. And then I love Elizabeth's. I love this because Elizabeth is a product designer and aspiring princess. Now, say what you will, I don't know what it would be like to work with Elizabeth, but I can tell you I want to meet her and I want to have an interview with her and I want to find out why she calls herself a princess. So here's a perfect example of how showing a bit of humor and a bit of personality is not a bad thing. She's won me on her side before I've even got close to looking at her project work. So keep that in mind. Reach out to her and ask her if you can call yourself a princess and copy her idea. I don't know if it's unfortunate because it's a screenshot, but there's a little star here above her photo and it actually animates and it's very, very majestical. So is that a word? Majestical? Majestic? Okay, let's keep going. There is no portfolio that I was prepared to put up that was bad because I didn't want to shame anyone. I tried to get an Internet Archive version of my own portfolio when it was bad, but I couldn't because they deleted it. So that was both beneficial for me and bad. So here's some examples of things not to do. A very dark and ominous image as a kind of leading image. A lot of stuff that I have to read. I ship stuff and like creating engaging visuals. And I also like craft beers in Wales. To learn more, click here. Big mistake. Here's those skill sliders I was talking to you about before. Don't put them on your portfolio. Don't put them on your CV. Design with a process I actually like, except that this sad little photo of like 4 Post-its on a dark wall is just miserable. And my work, there's a bit of a parody here about using PSD blanks. I actually agree with using PSD blanks, but the way that this one was used is maybe too, it looks like an Apple advertisement rather than an advertisement for the design. So typically if I do use PSD blanks, I flatten them so that they're no longer in 3-dimensional space, certainly not in motion in somebody walking through a car park. So yeah, check it out. There's some real funny stuff on this website. It's called The Worst Portfolio in the World, I think. Okay, just a few quick continued tips about designing your portfolio. As I said before, if you can't do this, then we're going to start to ask questions about whether you can do the job. We're here to see project experience quickly to see if you're going to be able to do the job. And there's no need to show everything. Tell us a story about yourself and engage with us quickly, and tell us what to do at the end. Don't just suggest, let's get a coffee. Maybe you should say, I'm available on this number or this email address. Reach out to me here. Just, tell us what to do, but don't make it too desperate sounding is what I wanted to say. So quickly, just a bit on cover letter. If you have a recruiter on board, there's no need for a cover letter. If you have to go through an apply now flow, which I would try to avoid if at all costs, or if somebody asks you for a cover letter, or you're reaching out to one of these people directly because you're at that stage where you're ready to launch your product, make the cover letter super simple. So try to match a few buzzwords with the job description if they've put it in there. If you have a real question that you can ask, like, I'm curious to know, is this possible? Put that in there as well, because it prompts them to answer. No, dear sir, no, dear madam, no, yours sincerely. Keep it extremely short and show a sense of humor. I'm just going to quickly read this. Hey Google, I'm really excited to apply for the position of UX designer. I've been working in UX design for X years, and in that time I've worked on more than X projects and focused on artificial intelligence and physical interfaces. My colleagues and peers describe me as dedicated, animated, focused, and fun. When I bribe them with cupcakes or deliver work early, they also describe me as awesome. You can view my portfolio here. Thanks very much for your time, and please let me know if there's any extra info you need. That's it. It's like 3-4 sentences. If you make it an email length, they're not going to read it. So I tried to make it a little bit funny. I tried to make it light and bright and airy and no drama. And this would work. You're welcome to steal it, take it, and use it if you need to write a cover letter. Okay. And social media. So I strongly suggest that you delete it. Either keep the account, but make it all completely private. There is no news that is good news. So you might say something that gets 80% of the world on your side, but 20% offside. You might have a photo of you that was in jest, but somebody takes offense to that. You might, I remember once, one of my talks, I said, why would you do that? The job's going to be stressful and you'll lose all your hair and go bald. And I really offended someone who had alopecia and was going bald. So, and I'm going bald. So I was like, but it was just me making fun of myself, but I also offended someone by accident. So yeah, no news is good news. Just leave it blank, empty. They're not going to say, well, I would have hired her, but her Twitter feed's blank. They're not going to say that. If you meet all of the criteria, the Twitter feed is the thing they check to find out reasons not to hire you, and they will find something. So just remove it. I highly recommend it. Instagram, Twitter, and all your social media. Okay, so we've done a quick view on design and iterate. I want to make sure we don't run out of too much time because we're about to go into deliver. So I'm going to skip over the questions so that we've got them for the question time. I hope that's all right, Chris, because I'm talking too much. So quickly go into deliver. Add the questions though, if you had questions about that process of design, because we'll cover them, but I want to make sure I can get through everything. So now it's time to apply for the job and interview for the job and deal with the design challenge. So quickly, applying for the job. Do not click apply now unless you're out of options. Try to get internally referred or go through a headhunter or a recruiter that you know, or somebody internal who can recommend you. You can add sources, talent, or recruiters or LinkedIn contacts now. Don't do it before when you weren't ready. What will happen is as you add them, you do the generic ad, you don't type a message, you just say add contact, you don't type anything, and LinkedIn will add them. They usually always say yes. And at that time, they will check out your profile. They will probably look at it. And that's your moment to shine. You've set it up, ready to go. It's almost like it was made for them. So this is the moment to do that when you're ready to apply. And what might happen is you don't actually have to apply. The talent person or sourcer will reach out to you and say, hey, Andrew, I saw that you added me to LinkedIn. We've got a position going. It might be suitable for you. And then they've reached out to you, which changes the power dynamic from you being a desperate candidate to being someone they discovered, which is much more in line with their objective to discover talent and bring them in rather than accept the application of a desperate Andrew. after they've added you, maybe wait a day if you haven't heard from them or two, and then send them an email, not a LinkedIn message, an email. And that's where you write that cover letter. That's where you contact them and say, hey, I saw your ad. It was for this position. I have this question, and here's a little bit about me. And the question should be real, because if you ask them a question, they will answer it. But if you don't ask a question, they have no reason to reply. So try to ask a question that's specific to the role that you actually do want to know the answer to. And how to handle no reply. So don't get angry if there's no reply. Don't get mad. Don't send them another email where you're mad. And don't try to get even. Don't post about them on LinkedIn or social media. Just let it go for a little while. And then you can message them again a few days later and say words to the effect of, hey, Mary, bumping this email in case it got lost in the chaos. Looking forward to hearing from you, Andrew. That's it. That's it. No, just emailing you to hope that, no word just, hey, Mary, bumping this email in case it got lost in the chaos. What I did there is I gave her an excuse for being negligent that she is now able to take up and reply to without having to be the bad guy. You don't want to make her feel bad, or he or she or anyone feel bad. You just want to tell them, hey, I'm just letting you know that I haven't heard back from you, but it's completely okay because I know you're probably crazy busy. And then they're going to say, yeah, I am crazy busy and he understands me. I'm going to reach out to him or her or whoever. And how to handle early rejection. So I was rejected by Google after an internal referral. So here's the email. A Googler recently referred you for this position, We have other candidates already in the process. They're a stronger match for the current open positions. We will continue to use our database and match you. Now, I would have thought that that was a rejection, right? Because we get these all the time, but it wasn't. I replied and I was super nice. Thanks for email. It's sad that you didn't actually get to see my online portfolio. Here it is. I knew that they didn't see it because I checked the analytics. Maybe if I was writing this today, I would maybe tone that down just a little bit more, but I was young and sprightly. I'm a user experience designer who can do this, this, and this, and this, and this seems to be sought after in the field. Please feel free to get back in touch with me should any position come available. I'd be open to positions in other parts of the world. Now, she replied with that she reviewed the portfolio, and now look, here's the question. When would you be able to start, and what's your eligibility to work in the United States? Bam, I'm in. So I was rejected, and I turned it around into an offer, essentially, to go to the next step. And that's what happened. So she referred me through to the recruiter. The recruiter had the call. I made her an ally, and then on I went. So if you get through all of these steps, the hard part's over. It's now time to interview. The hard part is over. You have got the job, essentially. Now you just need to not screw it up and not make simple, easy mistakes. So interviewing for the job is certainly part of the Rubik's Cube solving process, and you can do it. So research, refresh, check out the company, make sure that you know what their mission statement is, make sure you know what failures they've got, dress smart casual. Before the interview, behave like a crazy monkey. So there's this study done that if you raise your arms up in the air and you go in the bathroom before the interview, it can reduce your cortisol levels by about 15%, and you don't stress or sweat as much in the room, and you're super chill. Try it, it works. I did it in the bath. Don't get caught because it's a little bit nuts, but try it. Arrive 10 minutes early at least. Do not be late, ever, 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 ever. Do not be late. The first 30 seconds when you meet that first interview in the room, and maybe now Zoom, is the most crucial. There was a study done by MIT where they found that during that time, they make their mind up about you and spend the rest of the interview trying to confirm that bias that they've thought of as they met you. Shake their hand firmly if you are in a corona-enabled place. If not, do an elbow bump that maybe doesn't involve an injury, or if it's over Zoom, wave and smile and make a very warm and open connection. Even if you're having a bad day, just wave and smile. Hi, Mary. Hi, hi. And it's hard for that person to not connect with you. Oh, just a quick thing about shaking hands. If you are able to meet someone in person and it is a post-corona world, when you shake their hand, say their name back to them. So as you're shaking their hand, hi, Mary, nice to meet you. When you're touching someone and you say their name, it's highly likely they will never forget your name. Be yourself. Don't pretend to be somebody else, but still try to mirror the interviewer's energy. If they're a bit demure, you be a bit demure. If they're a bit excited, you be a bit excited. And be prepared for STAR questions. So they're the situation, task, action, results. So tell me about a time when a product was launched that wasn't representative of what you worked on? Well, there was a situation and my job was to do this. So I took this action and here's what happened. You obviously draw the question out, but that's the way that you answer all questions. Even if the question wasn't framed as a star question, practice making these star answers and record yourself talking to a camera and giving them until you can make them sound natural. Treat everyone as an equal and don't be a douche. Even if you are a douche, don't be one in the interview room, which was something I struggled with because I came across as too confident. And I interviewed at Skype once and they thought I was a douche and they told me, we thought you were being too arrogant. So I took that feedback on board and had to figure out a way to pretend not to be so that I could get a job. So remember the personas. As you meet each of these people, their objective is slightly different. Their knowledge of design is slightly different, and what they do and what they want from you is slightly different. So a few quick tips. Sources, they don't understand design. They want to pretend that they do because they don't like to be made a fool of. They're itching to reject you. They want to hear those buzzwords and they want to say that you are a viable candidate to the recruiter when they pass you on. Recruiter tips, internal recruiters. They don't necessarily understand design either. They're a little bit more versed with the buzzwords, but they try. They act nice and friendly, but really they're squinting at you, trying to figure out how to measure you to see if you will be successful or not, because they don't want to pass you forward if you're going to be a dud or embarrass them. They want to assess your experience level, but it doesn't necessarily need to match up in years. It needs to match up in capability. Their reputation is on the line if they recommend you as a dud, because you're wasting all of those interviewers' time for nothing. And you want to make them an ally because they will remember you and they won't stay at that company for long. So you might be rejected now for reasons outside of your control. Somebody else was a shoo-in, or the boss's son was getting the job, and you were rejected. And the recruiter might think, man, Andrew was great. I really liked him. I want him to get a job. And then next time they find out that there's a position open for a UX designer, they're like, I know just the person. And then they reach out to you on LinkedIn from their new company and you're in, because although you were rejected, you made them an ally, you treated them with respect. So just quickly on interviewers technically do understand design, not necessarily at your level, but they probably do because they're there to measure your capabilities really, and they care about design. They're busy and maybe tired and they're losing critical time by sitting with you, so be respectful of that. They care about the company, they want cool colleagues, they can make a tough call, they can say, no, I really want Andrew. He's great. I know he didn't interview well on that day, but it was his birthday or whatever it is. And they will fight for you if they can. If they have a gut feeling that you're the one, they will fight for you if you make that warm connection with them in the meeting or the room. They can be on your side, or they are on your side. Okay, just lastly, I'm going to quickly power through design challenges so we don't run out of too much time. Real world design challenges could be a trap. So if they ask you to work on their real product, they're probably just getting you to do UX design work for free. So if they ask you up front to do this, just don't go for the job. It's probably a dud. They want to measure not how good you are at drawing a box on a whiteboard. They want to measure how you think. They want to see how your brain decouples a problem and puts it into pieces in front of them, pieces that can be resolved individually so that you can solve the problem. So make sure you clarify details before jumping into solutions mode. And you can spend half the design challenge time just nailing down assumptions, doing some clustering exercises, getting the words from them that matter about the problem, so that the last step of solving the problem could actually be super easy. And they want to have fun. So like you're playing make-believe here, like kids in preschool. You can have fun with them. You can make crazy hypotheticals. Start drawing immediately. You're a designer after all. They want to see that your bias to action is to draw. Set expectations. Look, I'm not a very good artist, but I'm really good at solving problems under the hood. So let's, draw some diagrams rather than interfaces. Confirm with them the knowns and unknowns, like how much time do we have? How many customers are already in this product world? Process is more important than making it pretty. If you make a beautiful little wireframe on the whiteboard that doesn't solve any problems, you will fail the design challenge. If you create a diagram that explains the nature of the problem so much so that you can solve the problem with a sentence that would then lead to an interface, you're much more likely to succeed. Think out loud, tell them what you're thinking. You're allowed to, they want to hear what you're thinking. If you say nothing, they'll think you're thinking nothing. Try not to jump into the interface straight away. And I want to just show you an example. I didn't draw this, but my design challenge at Amazon was to create a hoverboard company. And I pretty much did this. I made a whiteboard filled with diagrams of arrows pointing. Mine was a little bit more structured, but it was essentially a big diagram of the flow of the product. And at the end, we had 10 minutes left, and the interviewer said, Andrew, I'm really worried. We've run out of time. You haven't yet drawn the interface. And it was a hoverboard company. So hypothetical, right? There's no hoverboards in the world. And I had to come up with the interface and the name in the last 10 minutes. And because I had nailed down the API structure, the way that it solves the problem, the way the customers interact with it, the interface was super easy. So I just drew a circle on the board, and she said, what is that? And I said, it's like a ring. You just put it on your finger, and I'm going to name the company Hovering. And you wave the ring on the hoverboard, and that's how you unlock it from the base station to, you know, ride the hoverboard. And it kind of blew her mind, because she was used to designers creating interfaces, mobile versions of interfaces. It's not necessarily what needed to happen. What needed to happen is they needed to see that I understood the nature of the problem, and that the interface was actually not the biggest part of the problem. Okay, clean the board when you're done. That's super important. Even if they tell you not to, lean in to do it and then get told not to do it. But if you don't do it, they're going to think lazy. So just grab the eraser. If it's paper and you've done it, stack the paper and hand the paper to them, and then thank them for their time. Remember, they're taking their time away from their real work to sit with some stranger. So mean it when you thank them. Thank them for their time and for spending the time and having so much fun with me while we play make-believe. Okay, I'm going to power through to quickly get to retrospective. So we've delivered in that we've done our application, we've interviewed, and we've done our design challenge. I'm sorry for powering through so quickly, but it's a lot of content to get through. The retrospective is super critical. When you're done, go to the movies, self-reflect. It doesn't matter if you screwed up. Just try to be grateful for the experience that you had sitting in a room with people who were judging you. And this is your moment to really iterate on your own design of yourself, of your product, to improve it for the next time. You'll probably never nail it first go. So if you don't do this retrospective and this evolution on yourself, you're wasting the opportunity. And it was not just a waste of their time, but a waste of yours. So spend some time to reflect and look at yourself closely. Be honest with yourself. If you failed in certain areas, that's completely fine. You can work on them so that you won't fail again. Don't post anything to social media like, just interviewed with Google and they were so mean to me, I hate them, you know, because then that's over. You're never going to get another job with them or possibly anyone else again, because the next place is going to think that you'll do the same about them if they reject you. And don't also put the positive stuff either, because it's just no news is good news. And try to make peace with it. So go to the movies, practice mindfulness meditation. I really like this lady, Pema Chodron. Listen to one of her audio tapes. She's amazing, and she always calms me down and makes me feel like the world's not going to end. So rejection happens. It doesn't matter that you were rejected. There is another UX job out there. There are many. There will be many more. The number is increasing. And you might actually be dodging a bullet. It might have been a shitty job that you didn't like. It could have been bad for your career. It could have been a horrible manager. If they rejected you, it's at that stage, after all of those interviews, it's highly likely that you weren't actually a right fit for that organization, that they could tell that you were too nice, or that they could tell that you were too focused on the thing that you did care about and not the thing that they cared about. And why would you want to work for someone or some company that makes you feel that way on a day-to-day basis? So consider the rejection as a bit of a gift too. It's not all bad news. And like I said, no doesn't mean no forever. So the way you handle the rejection gracefully, graciously matters, because it could mean that later a door would open either with that company again or with somebody who was on that hiring committee who loved you and moves on to a better company that can now recruit you. Okay, success. So the successful steps, if you are going to get through to success, is money. They want to talk to you about money. If anyone asks you about money early, do your best not to answer the question. Say something like, look, I'm really open to the salary range based on experience. I'm not necessarily prepared to lock myself down to an amount now, but I can tell you that I'm not the kind of candidate who will go through this whole process only to then pull the plug because of some money. So for me, what's most important is the project, the people, the product, and the money is the bit that is the least important. Now, that's not true, right? Because money matters, but it's one of those things it's like you can't talk about it without freaking everyone out. They will still keep asking you about the money because they do want to worry about it, but just be gracious and say, look, you know, what do you think's fair? What's this fair salary range? And then just try to be permeable and not too black and white about the money. Offer letters will come if you're successful and you've gotten through this process. The offer letter will have the salary range or the amount. That's how I found out how much money I was going to earn at Google, which was, it was in a letter when I finally got offered the job. That was the first moment I found out what my salary would be. That's not necessarily representative of all companies, but it's heading in that direction, which is, if you're too hard and fast about the money up front, they might think that that's the only thing you care about, which is sad, but unfortunately it's true. Background checks is a big thing. Don't lie about your date ranges, because they will come back to bite you, and the whole thing could be broken down because of a silly mistake. So before you go through, make sure in part of your design your CV and design your folio, you get all your dates lined up, because they will, depending on the company, want to verify that it's true. It is better to be truthful and have worked for a company less time than to pad it out and then have them find out that you lied after all of this work, because you will probably be rejected for lying more than being rejected for having 1 month too few, work hours assigned to a company. So just be honest to the day if you can. And then lastly, onboarding. Same thing applies in the first week of work. So all of the tips that I've just described to you, the interview sort of bleeds into that first week a bit, because that's their moment to check, is this person actually who we thought they were from the interview? So I want you to be able to be yourselves in the office, but just be careful that first week or first 4 weeks. Try to not ruffle too many feathers, and try to be a bit more like you're in the interview, open, honest maybe, but bright and warm, rather than angry about the inhumanity of it all, that the product is so crap and that the engineering team keeps letting, don't be too quick to turn into an angry UXer like me. Okay. Now, just with success, I just want to quickly show you something really troubled me today. So for my rejection slide, I found Neo dodging a bullet. And then for success, I was like, I want a woman to be my success image. So I Googled women success, and this is what came up. So I mean it, for fun, go to Google and try to find an image of success and women that is not sexist, with somebody riding a very phallic looking arrow or a woman pretending to be a man. And that really troubled me. So for the women on the call, I'm so sorry that there are no amazing images of successful women. And for the men on the call, please keep this in mind, that if you are ever photographing or building a stock photo portfolio, please take some photos of happy smiling women who are successful, not pretending to be men. Okay, remember, your career is your own project. It is a UX project. You can apply a formula to it to get through what seems like an impossible set of tasks. The formula will save you. And don't wait for permission to get started. Don't wait for an email back from me telling you that you're on the right track. You can make your own mind up. Get the feedback that you need from your peers and customers and users, but don't wait for permission to get started, because it is entirely in your hands. And if I can do it as that little farm boy with no education who failed maths and art, then you absolutely can, especially with the tools available to you today. Tools that are free and tools that are paid that are amazing, like project experience for companies like IKEA and banks that you would recognize. So I just want to say, we went a little bit over 10 minutes. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to post this on YouTube, but there'll be other content coming up soon. And if you have any questions, as always, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me. And I do my best to reply. And I'm really grateful for your time.